Brought to you by the Ramsey Network app. Download for content that keeps you motivated today.
You know, Rabbi taught me something else on that was interesting, that the Hebrew word for worship and it is very similar or almost exactly the same word for workship.
Mm-hmm.
To work is a form of worship. And in the New Testament, we would say to do your work as unto the Lord. But it's this idea that working in something that you were designed, the way you were designed to do, the way you were knit in your mother's womb, the way you were train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he'll not depart from it, and the way he is bent, the old King James says, and the way the child is bent, train up a child that the way they're designed and let them go in that is a form of worship. I remember I was just in Scotland and at St. Andrews where they shot the opening scene from Chariots of Fire. And one of the lines in there was, he said, "When I run, I feel God's pleasure."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a form of work, can be a form of worship and it's not workaholism. It's not some kind of weird spiritual thing.
By the way, we worked in the garden, right? I mean, the actual verse that talks about what Adam is tasked with doing in the garden, it uses the verb is lavod, right? Is to work. It says that you have to actually avod, you have to work, and then it says and vilishmor, and to guard, right? So you're there to work and you're to guard. Well, what kind of work is there to do in the garden, right? It's the Garden of Eden. Everything is perfect. Everything's wonderful, right? You got trees with fruit. You got animals you can name. Everything is awesome. And the idea is that even in the Garden of Eden, it's not going to be a Garden of Eden unless you have a task. People have to have a thing to do. And we're a bored society, and you can see us tearing ourselves apart because we don't have a thing to do.
I think it increases anxiety and all the other things as well. I think we saw some of that during the pandemic when we told people they weren't essential. It creates a different kind of mental illness then, because there's this idea that I'm not worthy to worship. I'm not worthy to do those things. And I raised a couple daughters and a son that are all married off now, and we had old dad jokes for the raising the teenage girls. It's like, before Adam got a woman, he got work. So if you're going to come date my daughter, you need to be talking about having a job or having a career.
I just saw Professor Scott Galloway mention that what women are looking for in a man is the ability to provide in the future. Psychologically, that's what they're actually looking for. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of people who are living at home in their 30s who don't have a job they love to do, and their growth is stunted because of that. And it seems to be hurting culture all around. Yeah. There's probably a deeper problem when it starts with education, where we tell people, get good grades, do the homework, go to college, get a degree, then do a job for 40 years. Do you think that's part of the issue?
Well, I think that we are all in this sort of post-50s mindset where we think of the way that work was in the 50s, and we think that is sort of the ideal of how work ought to be, which is very weird because the truth is that many of the jobs in the 50s are jobs that nobody would want to do. We talk about the idea that you worked at like GM at a factory for 30 years and then got a gold watch doing rivets. Like, how many people do you see in the modern world who want to stand over a machine doing rivets? That's not a thing. The 1950s are an outlier in human history. They're an outlier because basically the rest of the world had been completely destroyed, and the only industrial superpower on Earth that had not been completely destroyed was the United States, which meant that we could essentially have one person in the house, one person who is working full-time, making a great wage, doing a repetitive mechanical task. And that ended up collapsing in the 1960s and 70s, which is why you see America's debt problems start to explode in the 1960s and the 1970s. But if you go back before that, the reality is that everybody was a cooperative unit in the family in terms of work. I mean, you go back far enough and you go back to a farm and everybody's working all the time, right? If you go back to Proverbs, there's an entire section of Proverbs where it describes the ideal woman, right? We sing it every Friday night. It's called Eshes Chayil, right? It's the woman of valor. And that whole section of Proverbs is all about what the woman does. It talks about her starting a business. It talks about her, importing goods. It sounds like she started a corporation, is what it sounds like, the woman of valor. And so I think that that vision of what life is that like you just go into the job and you stay at the job for 30 years. That's not how the market really historically worked, and it's not how the market works right now. And I think our educational system is not designed for that. It was designed to churn out people who are supposed to fit in sort of particular tasks. I see it with my son. And my son is sort of heterodox thinker. He's 8 years old. He is good at math. He can't sit still because he's an 8-year-old boy. And what I see is that the stuff that he's really interested in, he's really interested in. And what a good educational system would do, and this is what we try and do at home with him, is dig into the stuff he's really interested in and use that as a gateway to learn the things that he's going to need to do, in the world.
In the way he's bent.
Exactly. And instead, what we try to do is bend the kid to fit the hole in the market. And that seems, it enervates, it makes people feel uncomfortable and angry because they feel as though they're being turned away from the thing they want to do in favor of the thing that, quote unquote, society wants them to do. And that's, I don't think it's necessary.
I've got 3 kids. They're very distinctly different, and they needed to go into 3 distinctly different things. And I'm already watching for that in the grandkids.
It's amazing how fast this
that one's
manifests.
going to do that. I can see it. I can already see it.
It's crazy.
Otherwise, they're going to be miserable, and they're going to suck at whatever they do that is outside their gifting set.
Well, I mean, so much of this is based on the false premise that human beings are a blank slate. That you have a kid, and the kid's a blank slate, and now you can sort of imprint on every blank slate what it is. If you've ever met a child, you know this is not true. It's amazing how many things are reliant on people never meeting a child, right? The idea that children are inherently good. Children aren't inherently good. Are you kidding me? Have you ever met a child? Children are inherently really, really bad, actually. They're innocent, but they're certainly not good, and they require civilization. And they have predilections. They have things they like to do. They have things they're interested in. My daughter is a humanities kid. I can see she's a humanities kid. My son is going to be an engineer. Like, you can see it right now. All he cares about is rockets. My 4-year-old is a drama queen. Like, you can see it. She's adorable, and she's also a drama queen. And so we're going to have to see how
She'll
that
be a
manifests.
YouTuber in no time.
Yeah, exactly. God forbid. But she's. But
She'll
again,
be on the microphone debating her father.
yeah.
Like my daughter.
Oh, that's what you have to look forward to, Ben.